Oh.
Oralidad, oral history. The Instituto Cervantes is doing something new and exciting in New Mexico, and it's perfectly natural for that area, especially in the middle of the southwest of the United States and north of Mexico, because all the cultures that have come there have oral history. You can start with the Native American cultures and just look at their pottery with the storytellers that are so popular. Those potteries that have a woman with children crawling all over her and sitting at her knee while she is telling them stories, oral history of the tribes and the families and the customs of the people. Then in Santa Fe, there is a library that has a project, or not a project, but has the results of a project that was the produce of the Public Works Administration in New Mexico in the 1930s, where the government put people to work to just go out and collect oral history. And all those oral histories are transcribed and collected and in the library there that now are over 100 years or almost 100 years old. They're 90 years old. Imagine if somebody could do that today, how valuable that would be in 100 years from now. We don't tend to think that what we know now is that important, that no one would be interested after we die or 100 years after we die, but that's just not the case. It's absolutely true. And then you get into things where people actually go out and collect oral histories, like Nazario Garcia, who's on the program, or Orlando Romero, who's collected it from his family, or Nicolas Chavez, who did research on a topic about it and went and interviewed people and collected their oral histories of how it was and how things began. So oral history becomes, to historians, something very valuable. You have to be careful with oral history, because when people talk about themselves, they tend to embellish it a little bit, and that's okay. Historians will know that. When you talk in the first person, you're not going to say, well, my history is that I'm ugly and I never did anything good and I'm lucky I never went to jail. You're never going to say something like that. You're just going to talk about anything good that you did. So oral history has that going through it. But there is a germ of truth in all oral histories. And I remember one oral historian in New Mexico, maybe 20, 25 years ago, there was a folklore society that doesn't exist anymore. And of course, because it was folklore, they collected oral history too. And that person talked about the value of oral history, in that in every legend, which is oral too, legends are oral, there's always a germ of truth somewhere hidden in that legend. And so these things are handed down from years to years, from generation to generation to today. And if people appreciate them, that's great. And when we have a conference like this, it wakens people up. It reminds people of the value of oral history. I personally have benefited from oral history as a historian. I've interviewed people, I've listened to tapes of people, I've looked at transcripts of oral histories to fill out whatever it was I was trying to research. It's one thing to read their letters, it's another thing to hear their words, or even read their words as transcribed from an interview. So all of that becomes very valuable. It's almost like mining for golden nuggets in the past. The other thing I would say, oral history isn't all in the past. I've always encouraged youth to think about, what kind of conversations do you have with your grandparents? Why don't you ask them someday how they met, and what they did when they were little, and stuff like that. Because grandparents will love to talk about themselves, especially to their grandchildren. And how many of us have had grandparents who have passed away, and we wish we could talk to them now and ask them questions about the family. So I would encourage all people not to lose those opportunities, and to talk to your elders and ask them just simple, basic questions. How did you cook when there was no gas ovens, or what was it like when there weren't indoor restrooms? Which my grandparents grew up without houses, and then the indoor plumbing came in, and it was something different for them, really different, almost unclean to put a bathroom in a house. When you grow up with, the outhouse is way away from the house. So those kinds of things become fascinating. We are going through times of great change with technology and everything, even this Zoom, for example. I'm sure my grandchildren would be interested in knowing how my wife and I met when we didn't have internet or email and we lived in different countries at the time. How do you do that? They have no idea. And so oral history becomes not only a thing of the past, but a way of preserving now for the future. And so I'm very proud to be associated with Instituto Cervantes as its former chairman of its advisory committee. Now it's emeritus chairman de distancia. And I'm very proud that Sylvia came up with the idea of Oralidad and wrote the grant to raise the money to bring these people together. People will see in the course of this program the traditions and the value of oral history to all the cultures that make up what is New Mexico, the unique place that it is.